On the morning of the 8th of July, 1905, a man in a small sailing skiff pushed out from a shack on this shore, went to arrest a poacher, and was shot dead on the water. He was 35 years old. He had a wife and 2 small sons. He was one of the first game wardens in the United States, and he is the reason this path has a name. Almost nobody who walks it knows who he was. This is the Guy Bradley Trail at Flamingo, at the very bottom of Everglades National Park, in the far southern tip of mainland Florida. The path runs about a mile each way along the edge of Florida Bay, between the visitor center and the campground, past old pier pilings left over from another century. To the south is shallow water and a scattering of low green keys, and beyond them the open Gulf. There is no further south to go. It is an easy walk, flat, short, breezy, with the bay on one side and buttonwood and mangrove on the other. Ospreys work the shallows. In winter the light is clean and the wind comes off the water and the whole place feels gentle. It is worth holding on to that gentleness, because the story attached to this ground is not gentle at all, and it begins with hats. First, this place. Flamingo was a real settlement, founded around 1892 at the eastern end of Cape Sable. It took its name in 1893, when the residents had to name a post office and chose the most striking bird they knew. There was no road. You arrived by boat. Perhaps 50 families lived here at the peak, fishing, burning buttonwood for charcoal, farming a little, and hunting. It was poor, remote, mosquito-ridden, and largely beyond the reach of any law. Try to hold that in your head as you look out across this water. No road, no telegraph. The nearest court was in Key West, across the bay. If you were sent here as the single officer responsible for enforcing a brand new and deeply unpopular law, over thousands of square miles of mangrove and open water, among neighbors who depended on breaking that law for their income, you would be entirely on your own. Now the hats. In the closing decades of the 19th century, fashionable women in New York, London, and Paris wore feathers. Not a discreet feather. Great sprays and plumes, and sometimes whole birds, wings, heads and all, mounted on enormous hats. In 1886, the ornithologist Frank Chapman walked through uptown Manhattan and simply counted. Of about 700 women's hats he saw, 542 carried feathers, wings, or entire birds from some 40 species. That was one afternoon on one street. The millinery trade was an industry. In 1886, the American Ornithologists' Union estimated that around 5 million birds a year were being killed for it in North America, and that some 50 species were being taken. In a single 9-month period, the London market absorbed feathers from close to 130,000 egrets. One London auction record from 1902 shows more than 48,000 ounces of plumes sold. That single sale represents something like 200,000 birds. And the money was extraordinary. The finest plumes, the aigrettes, fetched around $32 an ounce, which was about the price of gold at the time, and by some accounts twice it. The ornithologist Frank Chapman said flatly that egret plumes were worth double their weight in gold. So a man in a small boat in a Florida swamp, shooting birds off their nests, was harvesting something as valuable by weight as the metal in a bank vault. That is the engine behind everything that happened here. Here is the cruelty at the heart of it. The plumes the trade wanted were the fine trailing feathers that egrets and herons grow only in the breeding season, only when they are courting and nesting. To get them, you had to kill the adult birds at the height of the nesting season, at the nest, in the colony. And when both parents were dead, the chicks starved in the nest above the bodies. The trade was designed, structurally, to destroy the next generation as well as this one. Florida had the Rookeries, great colonies of egrets, herons, spoonbills, and ibis nesting in the mangroves in numbers that early visitors described as clouds. Plume hunters worked through them methodically, colony by colony, and one after another the great Rookeries fell silent. Estimates vary, but Florida's egret populations are thought to have been cut by something on the order of 95%, and by about 1903, the snowy egret had been pushed to the edge of extinction. Whole nesting grounds simply ceased to exist. Into this arrives a boy. Guy Morrill Bradley was born on the 25th of April, 1870, in Chicago. When he was about 6, the family came south to Florida, and his father held a series of positions on that raw frontier coast, keeper of the Fort Lauderdale House of Refuge, later superintendent of schools in Dade County. The Bradleys were part of the tiny scattered population of southeast Florida before there was anything there, before Miami existed as a city. Picture the world he grew up in, a handful of families along an empty beach, mail carried on foot along the sand by men who became known as the barefoot mailmen, boats for everything. Guy Bradley grew up as a boatman and a woodsman in a landscape with almost no people in it and an almost unimaginable abundance of birds. He knew the coast, the Keys, the creeks, and the Rookeries better than almost anyone alive. And so, of course, he was recruited into the plume trade. In 1885, at the age of 15, Guy Bradley went out as a scout and hunter on an expedition led by a French plume hunter named Jean Chevalier, aboard a schooner, along with his older brother Louis and his friend Charlie Pierce, whose diary is how we know about it. This is the crucial fact about him and the one people leave out. He was not an outsider who arrived to lecture the hunters. He was one of them. That expedition lasted several weeks. The record of it says that they killed 1,397 individual birds of 36 different species. A boy of 15, working a rifle and a boat, taking part in the systematic dismantling of the thing he loved. He went on other hunts through his 20s between jobs as a postman, a farmer, and a boatman. And then, at some point, something in him turned. But he did change his mind, and we have it in his own hand. Writing later to William Dutcher of the Audubon movement, he said this: "I used to hunt plume birds, but since the game laws were passed, I have not killed a plume bird, for it is a cruel and hard calling, notwithstanding being unlawful. I make this statement upon honor, a cruel and hard calling." He had done it, and he knew precisely what it was. The chance came from a long way off. In Boston, in the mid-1890s, two cousins, Harriet Hemingway and Minna Hall, began inviting the fashionable women of the city to tea and asking them, one by one, to stop wearing feathers. Out of that campaign grew the Massachusetts Audubon Society, and out of that grew a national movement, state Audubon societies, boycotts, and pressure on legislatures. The plume trade was going to be attacked from the drawing rooms as well as the swamps. Laws followed. Florida passed a non-game bird protection law, but a law without enforcement is paper. So the American Ornithologists' Union, at the urging of the Florida Audubon Society, decided to pay for its own game wardens out of private money. In 1902, they hired Guy Bradley. He was among the very first bird wardens in the country. His salary was $35 a month. Look at what $35 a month bought. His territory ran from the 10,000 islands on the Gulf Coast through the whole of the Everglades down to Key West. Thousands of square miles of mangrove, marsh, bay, and channel, essentially all of it water, most of it uninhabited, all of it accessible only by boat. One man, one small sailing skiff, and a coastline full of people whose living he was there to end. He was serious about it. He got himself appointed a deputy sheriff of Monroe County as well, so that he would have real powers of arrest and not merely the moral authority of a private society. He patrolled. He warned people. He made arrests. He had, by all accounts, remarkable local knowledge, and he used it. And over 3 years, he made himself thoroughly and dangerously unpopular in his own neighborhood. Understand what he was being asked to do. He was policing his neighbors. These were men he had grown up around, men who had hunted alongside him, men whose children played with his. They were not cartoon villains. They were poor people in a poor place, and plumes were the best money available. Bradley was asking them to give that up because women in New York had begun to feel uneasy about their hats. Among them was a man named Walter Smith, an aging Civil War veteran and marksman with a reputation for trouble, who lived at Flamingo with his sons Tom and Danny. Bradley had already arrested Tom for poaching twice. According to the accounts, Smith had told Bradley plainly what would happen if he did it again. "You ever arrest one of my boys again," he is reported to have said, "I will kill you." On the morning of the 8th of July, 1905, Guy Bradley was at home here at Flamingo with his family when he heard shots. He knew what shots meant in the nesting season. Out toward the Oyster Keys, a couple of miles offshore, lay Smith's schooner, the Cleveland. Bradley got into his small boat alone and went out to it. His wife watched him go. It was the last time she saw him alive. He came alongside. The Smith boys had been shooting up a rookery. Bradley said he was there to arrest Tom. There was an argument across the water between the two boats. And then Walter Smith raised a rifle and shot Guy Bradley once, and Bradley went down into the bottom of his skiff, and the boat drifted away with the tide. Smith sailed to Key West and turned himself in to the sheriff the next day. His brother and a search party found the boat the following day. It had drifted roughly 10 miles from where the shooting happened. Guy Bradley was in it. He had bled to death, alone, on the water he had spent 3 years trying to protect. He was 35. His wife Froni was left at Flamingo with 2 young boys and no income at all. Donations to Audubon later bought her a house in Key West. Walter Smith claimed self-defense. He said Bradley had fired first and hit his boat. Bradley's own gun had not been fired. Smith sat in jail about 5 months, unable to raise $5,000 in bail, and then in December of 1905, the case simply stopped. It never reached a trial jury. The grand jury returned no true bill. They declined to indict him at all, and he walked free. That is the part that lodges in the throat. A sworn deputy sheriff, a paid warden, shot in daylight, and there was never even a trial. The grand jury was drawn from local people who hated the bird laws, and the state senator who had championed those laws appeared for the defense. There was a rougher justice afterward. While Smith sat in jail, Bradley's 2 brothers-in-law burned his Flamingo house to the ground. But no court ever held anyone responsible for the death of Guy Bradley. And yet, the killing did something that 3 years of patrolling had not. It made the front pages. The New York Times covered it. The New York Herald covered it. Forest and Stream covered it. And the Audubon societies made absolutely certain that America knew that a man had been murdered over a hat. A remote poaching dispute at the end of Florida became a national moral question, more or less overnight. Bradley was not the last. In November 1908, another Audubon warden, Columbus McLeod, vanished while looking for egret hunters in Charlotte Harbor on the Gulf Coast. His boat was found sunk, weighted down with sandbags. His hat was recovered nearby, cut through twice as if with an axe with blood and hair on it. His body was never found and no one was ever convicted. Weeks earlier, a warden in South Carolina, Presley Reeves, had been shot from ambush. 5 men were charged. None were convicted. The legal machinery ground into motion. The Lacey Act of 1900 had already made it a federal offense to carry illegally taken wildlife across state lines. In 1910, New York State, which was the heart of the American feather trade, passed the Audubon plumage law and banned the sale of protected birds' feathers outright, and the market lost its biggest room. Then in 1918, the Migratory Bird Treaty Act placed roughly 1,100 species and their feathers, eggs, and nests under federal protection. The trade was finished. And with the trade gone, the birds came back. Not all the way and not everywhere, and never to the numbers the first travelers described. But the great egret and the snowy egret, which had been driven to the edge, recovered. Today you can stand on this path in winter and watch them work the shallows without thinking about it, which is exactly the measure of how completely the thing was won. They buried Guy Bradley on a shell ridge at Cape Sable, looking out across Florida Bay. The Florida Audubon Society raised a stone over him. It read, Guy M. Bradley, 1870 to 1905, faithful unto death. As game warden of Monroe County, he gave his life for the cause to which he was pledged. In 1960, Hurricane Donna came through and the sea took the grave. The gravestone itself was recovered, and it is here, at Flamingo, where visitors can see it, along with a replacement memorial. There is this trail, and the visitor center at the end of it was renamed for him when it reopened in 2023. There are awards in his name too, given each year to officers who do the same job he did in the same kind of dangerous places for the same reasons. Something was settled here that we now take entirely for granted, that a wild bird is not simply a commodity available to whoever gets to it first, that a public can own a living thing in common and can defend it, and can send a man out in a boat with a badge to enforce that. In 1905, that was a genuinely radical proposition. Guy Bradley died proving it was one worth having. And it is worth being honest about the man, because the honest version is better. He was not born a conservationist. He killed birds for money as a boy, in numbers, and he knew exactly what he was doing when he did it. What makes him remarkable is not innocence. It is that he changed his mind, and then he stood in the water and took the consequences of having changed it. Out there in the shallows now are the descendants of the survivors. Great egrets, snowy egrets, roseate spoonbills, wood storks, white ibis. They are still in trouble for different reasons, because the water that feeds this bay has been dammed and diverted and drained for a century. Their nesting collapsed again in the 20th century, not from guns this time, but from canals. The fight simply changed shape. So this short, easy trail is a memorial, and a rather good one. It does not shout. It just puts you on the water where it happened, with the birds in front of you, and lets you work out what it costs to have them there. Every egret standing in that shallow water is a small piece of a very old argument that was won at close range by one man in a boat. path runs out at the edge of the campground, and the bay just keeps going, pale and shallow and full of birds, all the way to the horizon. He would recognize it. That is the thing worth carrying out of here. A man went out on that water alone against his own neighbors for the sake of birds that almost everyone then treated as raw material. Because of what he did and what was done to him, they are still standing out there. Thank you for watching. Follow for more trails of the world.